This is a 2009 BMW X5 30D, and when this car came out, it started a renaissance in the SUV world along with the Porsche Cayenne. This was one of the first times when a major manufacturer like BMW made a car that had basically no off-road capability, and it managed to sell really well. So today we're going to take a look at it, we're going to see what the quirks and features are, and we're going to see what it's like to drive. And before we get started, I just want to thank this channel's sponsor, and that's you. This channel currently has 28 subscribers, so if you want to be the 29th, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Anyways, let's get started with the review. Okay, so this is the second generation of the X5, the E70 as the enthusiasts know it, and this came out right after the E55, which was BMW's first attempt at an SUV. The E55 was actually very capable off-road. It had high ground clearance, it had fat tires, it had a manual transmission. It was basically everything you wanted in an SUV at that time. But then when it came to refresh the car, BMW saw that basically none of the drivers were using it off-road, and it was basically a road-only car that had off-road capabilities, which prompted BMW to make this, which is actually just a road car in an SUV form and an off-roader look. And that becomes very apparent on the side profile, where you have these very rugged side skirts, basically off-road inspired, and then up here you have these roof rails. And none of these things actually make a difference. They're basically useless. I've never stepped on this personally, and it's just to make the car look more off-roady. Basically, this is an off-road car for people who never go off-road. Okay, enough with the talking, let's start with the quirks. So the first quirk of this car is the key. You can see that this key is basically what you would get in a 3 Series from this era. If it's 35 degrees outside, you could probably cook an egg on the leather seats. So what you would do in a sunny day is you would just go outside and then hold down the unlock button, and then the windows will start to roll down, and then you can see once they're cracked, you would just leave them like that. You can just lock the car like this and then leave it so it can kind of recirculate. But what happens if it's not hot outside but it's cold? Well, BMW thought about that as well. Okay, so imagine it's a cold January day and you want to heat the car up, but you don't want to be next to it. So what you do is you put the key in like this, and then you start the car, and then what you can do is, after you've set your climate, what you can do is just turn the car off, take the key out, and then put your foot on the brake pedal and start the car again. And you can see the car starts right up without the key in the ignition. And now you can just step outside, close the door, lock the car, and go back inside of your house while the car heats up for you. All right, now getting into the interior quirks, I just want to mention that this car has a very hefty door sound, just like basically every other BMW, so let's hear it. Very nice. Okay, and now once we're in the interior, one of the quirks of this car is just the heaviness of the steering. I mean, this car has a servo, it's not like it doesn't, but the thing is, it's 2.2 tons, so it's going to be extremely heavy. And honestly, when you're parking this, it's basically a nightmare. If you were a smaller person, you would have a really hard time parking this thing, even using 2 arms. So right here, the car is stationary, and then turning the steering wheel with 1 arm, it's really, really heavy, like really, really heavy. And in the same theme, you can see how the steering wheel is really thick. One of the first things that I notice when I get into this car after a long time is just the thickness of the steering wheel and the contours. I've never seen this on a BMW wheel that's in a smaller car like my E39, and it seems like BMW knew that the steering was going to be heavy, and they made the steering wheel beefy to go along with it. And another thing worth mentioning in this interior is that everything is very high quality. Even though these buttons right here are plastic, it's very satisfying to use them. And another cool quirk of BMWs from this era is that if you hover over the presets right here, you don't even have to press them. If you hover over them, they're going to show what you're actually going to press before you press it. Another very cool feature is this double opening glove box, and then you can see there's an electronic release right here, and you press it, and then it splits and it opens 2 ways, you can see. And then when you close it, they close both at the same time. This is a beautiful action, and just this attention to detail is what makes this car really cool. I've been on a lot of BMWs, a lot of newer BMWs, and none of them have a cool glove box like this one. You can see how BMW tried to include this button right here. This is a automatic hill descent mode. It's basically cruise control, but when you're going downhill, and it only works at low speeds. But BMW put that there just so you still think that this is an off-road vehicle, even though it isn't. Another thing that makes it kind of obvious that this isn't really an off-roader are these 20-inch wheels, which came from the factory, as well as these low-profile tires. And you're probably not going to go off-roading with these. Nowadays, it's very common to see even 21, 22-inch wheels on SUVs, but this was pretty big at the time. The coupe version of this car, the X6 from the same generation, the E71, was actually very harshly mocked by Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear for not being able to climb up some hill when a Range Rover could. That just drives the point home that this car is not really meant to be off-roaded. Now here's another cool feature of this car, which is the tailgate. And the 3 Series from this era, the E91, it had a split open tailgate, so you could open just the glass and then you could reach in and grab whatever you wanted. Here they couldn't do that because obviously the glass would be too high for some people. So what they did is the next best thing, and that is it's also a split tailgate. You can see this part opens up like this, and then if you wanted to load something in even further, then you have this lever right here and you drop it down like this. And this is very useful. You can just sit on this, and it's very useful for tailgating, or if you're at a barbecue or something. Very nice feature. Also, this really helps if you have a car parked right next to you. If this entire tailgate opened in one piece, then it would probably hit the car behind you when you were opening it. So it truly is practical. Now, I mentioned that this car is a 30D. It's a 3-liter diesel, one big turbo. It's a turbo diesel, and it makes around 230 horsepower. I'll talk a little more about the models available later, but now let's hear how this car sounds. Okay, so foot on the brake, startup. Very nice idle. And then let's give it some revs. That's the red line right there at 4,000 RPM. All right, so xDrive 30D. This car was offered in many models. If we're talking about the diesels, there was a 30SD, there was also a 35D, there was also a 40D and an M50D, and that's just the diesel models. If we're counting the gas models, there was a 30i, there was a 30SI, there was a 35i, there was a 48i, and there was a 50i, and then finally there was the X5M, which was the most powerful model with around 500 horsepower. And that's probably my dream car right there. I mean, this car with that engine, I can't imagine how good it sounds. Anyways, that's enough about the models. Let's take this car out for a spin. Okay, so taking the X5 out for a ride. Now, I know I've said a lot about this car not being off-roady or whatever, but that's not really a bad thing. What I'm saying is that this is a perfect on-road car, and that's a lot better than being a good off-road car. Anyways, we don't really have to go far for me to tell you that this driving experience of this car is really nice. The ride is a bit harsh with the low-profile tires, and the stock suspension is not really that great. Apart from that, this car is really nice. If you get some tires that are a bit thicker, have a bit more sidewall, it's going to be no problem. As I said, this model has 230 horsepower, so the acceleration is not great or anything. I think it's 8 seconds to 0 to 100, but it's not about that. This car really has enough horsepower so that you can actually overtake someone, and it's definitely not underpowered by any means. Another thing that I really want to mention is that when you're driving this car, it's crazy. For my E39, this is like driving 2 cars at the same time. It's like you feel like you're in a tank. It's so big, and the ride height is a lot higher than what you would normally get in a normal car, normal sedan or something like that. Now, even though this is not a performance car, it's really enjoyable to drive it as a car enthusiast because of the turbo. The turbo is like really huge, and it makes this great sound. I'm gonna put the window down so you can hear it a bit. All right, hopefully not too much wind noise, and I'm just gonna give it a bit of turbo. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear the turbo right there, but man, the turbo is so good on this car. I know I've said this already, but the turbo is so big, and it just spools up. By the time you get to the 4,000 RPM red line, it sounds crazy. It's a whole different thing. And right now we're on the bridge. I'm gonna give it a bit of gas, and you can hear the turbo spool up. Amazing. Now, these cars came standard with a 6-speed automatic gearbox, so there was no manual in this car. And after, I think in the facelift, you could get a 8-speed, the upgraded ZF transmission. But even with a 6-speed, I think this car feels really adequate. I mean, it's just amazing. There's a lot of torque down low, and then once you get going, you could kind of forget about it. All right, so here's an Overtake with full throttle. It's crazy. Like, the sound is crazy. The speed is crazy. It's crazy. I know I say this about every car, but it's just so fun to get in it, and you press the throttle, and there's 6 cylinders in a straight line. There's 3 liters of power right there, and then you just press it, it shifts down, and it just goes. It goes. It's crazy. Amazing. Just amazing. The suspension is is very hard, but that means it's very planted to the road as well. You would expect that a car like this, you know, it's sitting a bit higher than a normal car, and you would expect it to be a bit floaty, but it's really not. It's very well planted. I really don't feel any kind of wobble side to side or anything like that. No floatiness, very direct, very planted, and just very fun. Let's get another pull in. Crazy, just crazy. And what's really crazy when you think about it is that this car goes this fast, but it's so heavy, you know. You would expect, if you have a lighter car, if you have a, I don't know, a convertible or something like that, you would expect it to go fast because, you know, it has to move less weight, but this is really, really heavy, and you don't expect it. You really don't. As I've said, the best part of this car is that if you're in a tight street and you have buildings to the left and to the right of you, and you press the gas pedal, you don't even have to press it hard, but you press the gas pedal and you just hear that turbo spooling up and collecting air. It's the feeling, the noise, it's immense, it's crazy. Another thing that I really want to mention about this car is that the rear view mirrors are huge. This car is huge and the rear view mirrors are huge, probably like 4 times the size of an E39 mirror. And the visibility is really great. When you're parking, you have to wrestle a lot with the steering wheel, but you don't have to worry about visibility at all. All right, so we're on the bridge once again, and here's full throttle. It's that turbo whine. There's no blow off. There's no, you know, there's no whistle, but the whine, the spooling up, that's what's crazy. Amazing, just amazing. All right, I still have no market score, I still have no Doug score, but I really, really like this car, and this car is definitely another 10 out of 10 for me. Even with this lowest range model, which is the 30D, with only 230 horsepower, I know it sounds crazy, but only 230, it still is really, really fun to drive, really nice. And I mean, this car has around 190,000 kilometers, and it's really, really nice. So I just want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.